What is going on, guys, and welcome to Dynasty Dumbies, your home for the latest and greatest in college football news and action. We're your hosts, Tony and Hunter, and we're going to jump right into some of these weekly storylines, starting off with a pretty big one coming out of Penn State. Drew Aller is out for the season. He ended up hurting his right leg, and they said that I don't remember if they said he'll need surgery or not, but he will be out for the season, which just makes Penn State's season even worse than it already is.
I hope him a speedy recovery. From what I've read, sounds like he's not going to be able to get a medical red shirt either. Obviously, he can appeal, and I do hope that he can and will appeal. However, it's going to be hard. I mean, he decided to come back for his senior season here instead of going pro, and unfortunately, it looks like it's probably not been the decision that he thought it was going to be. I'm never going to say he made the wrong decision. I'm not in his shoes. I don't know what would have been best for him, but this is definitely not the way he most likely expected it to go. He was going to be a top draft pick last year if he went out, but now he's going to fall later in the draft. I do hope he recovers, and I hope he can bounce back from this, but super sad to see, especially with the expectations that he had coming in.
You never like seeing these, top players, especially in the quarterback position, go down in the season, no matter how bad their season's going. But just to add insult to injury, the other big news coming out of Penn State, of course, is James Franklin getting fired. A $49 million buyout, which is absurd to say the least.
Being a fired coach is the best job in sports. I say backup quarterback, but fired college football coach, best job in sports.
There's so many coaches out there that are still getting paid to this day, and you see the same with athletes. Where what is it, Bobby Bonilla Day every year, where he gets his yearly.
That's a great pull.
Yeah, like his yearly installment from the Mets, and it's just so funny. I mean, I can't imagine what it'd be like to be like, well, you suck at your job, you're fired, here's $49 million. And it's like, oh, yeah, sure, why not? Yeah, like, I'll take that. Like, I know he'd probably rather still be on that sideline with that team to at least finish out the season, but they decided to go ahead and pull the plug. And I don't really know how much the Drew Aller injury might have played into that, honestly. Seeing as their starting quarterback going down and they're going to be running the backup and whoever else possibly for the rest of the season, maybe this was their thought of, let's just clean house almost.
I would like to think that the Aller injury doesn't play in a factor into this. It's, that $49 million buyout is second to only Jimbo's at A&M at, I believe it was $76 million. But one thing with the buyout is that he is required to look for a new job in coaching or broadcasting, and if that job pays less than $8 million per year through what he's owed through 2031, then Penn State has to pay the difference. So I don't know how legally it works, but I guess he has to prove that he sought gainful employment and attempted to find a new job. But if I was him, I would definitely be kind of dragging my feet there and trying, you got $49 million, might as well take a year off, figure things out. But obviously, I think James Franklin's one of those guys that is a competitor, so I do expect him to most likely land somewhere. But, it's, I will say I'm really surprised that they fired him halfway through the season here. If you think about this, I mean, there's an alternate timeline where this is Ryan Day getting fired and not James Franklin. Because last year, Ohio State fans were begging for Ryan Day to get fired, and then he goes on to win the Natty. Just a few plays go Penn State's way last year. They win the Natty, and James Franklin saves his job. And just 2 weeks ago, they were number 3 team in the country, up 7 points in an overtime game versus Oregon. So things change really quickly. Franklin obviously had a ton of success overall at Penn State, though.
Yeah, he's always, going to be a highly touted coach candidate, no matter where it is. Somebody is going to be willing to, pay a lot. And it's going to come into question is, who's Penn State going to hire in his replacement? Because, you just forked up all this money to buy him out. are you willing to fork up even more for, a highly touted name? So
Do you
we're gonna
think
have
you
to
can
see
get someone better than James Franklin? They must have some
it's
names in mind.
they must think that they can go swoop up a name that's possibly still with a team. Of course, I don't believe a second of it, but everyone's saying Kurt Signetti. Don't believe it for a second. I think he stays right where he's at because he's built that team to exactly how he wants it. So to me, that's an absolute no go unless they give him the entire state of Pennsylvania. Possibly, I don't even know.
Signetti,
I don't even know what it would take to get him there.
Signetti's an interesting one. As a JMU fan, I was in the position of him saying he would not leave JMU, and then a week later he is in Bloomington with Indiana. So I will never say never, but I think people don't understand the money that Indiana has. His current contract and his current coaching pool is some of the highest paid money in college football. His coaching pool is $11 million for his coaches. For example, Michigan has the highest at $11.7 million. So Indiana is already committed financially to him. It becomes is Penn State going to back up every Brinks truck, like you said, in the state of Pennsylvania for him. They're going to have to offer him something absurd. I do think he's going to stay with Indiana. Financially, they've already committed to him, and he's already instilled his mindset in that program.
It's going to be something to look out for. I mean, it's going to be the talking point of the offseason more than likely with all these job openings that are popping up now. But we'll have to keep an eye on it. I'd be willing to bet Franklin ends up somewhere. Keep an eye out. Maybe he ends up at Tech. You never know. That would be a pretty interesting one. But a big name I'm always going to look out is good old Coach Ed Orgeron. I'd like to see him back on the sideline. Go Tigers! Get them Nittany Lions. Maybe I'd love to hear him up in Happy Valley, but we'll have to see. But a couple other coaches here that also got the boot. Oregon State fires Trent Bray after a very just abysmal 2 seasons with Oregon State with a 5-14 record, and then UAB gives the boot to Trent Dilfer finally, who they thought would be able to come in and turn that program around, and has done almost the exact opposite.
Both of these programs have been in a tough spot. UAB, I never really liked the Trent Dilfer hire, if I'm being honest. I thought it was them trying to make a splash hire, but they didn't really make a splash. It was a flashy name, but really didn't amount to nothing. I do feel a little bit bad for Trent Bray, though, from Oregon State. He took over from a really tough spot from Jonathan Smith, who was a Corvallis local guy, former quarterback, who left for Michigan State, who his tenure hasn't been that great at Michigan State, but he left Oregon State in the midst of the Pac-12 collapsing and decided to go, to a more secure future. Maybe there's a reuniting in the future if he leaves Michigan State, but that Oregon State job is definitely in a tough spot with the Pac-12 dissolving. Obviously, they'll have the new conference starting next year, but not the Pac-12 it once was. But
yeah.
there's stuff to be said that Oregon State does have a great fan base, so it sucks to see them at 0-7.
It's never a good thing. I always like when they give the run to Oregon. It's always a great rivalry game when those two would play, and it just hasn't been great lately. But I want to quickly hit on the UAB. With Trent Dilfer is. I never really thought, I agree with you, I never really thought that was a great hire to begin with, because I don't think he had much coaching experience leading up to that. I know he had coached in high school, and I don't know if he had any sort of college experience before that, but I do know for a fact that in the past year, especially last year and then the off season of this year, he was really trying a little bro, John Sumrall, all the time. And I know it last year when Tulane played UAB and beat the brakes off of them, putting up, I think it was 71 on them. And after the game, Dilfer was, had a lengthy conversation with Sumrall and I know it was not all flowers and sunshine what was said. So I don't really know where Trent really got this like thing from himself, or how he would kind of act towards other coaches and whatnot. But if this is what it takes for him to realize that he needs to take a step down and maybe go back to the booth, then this is what it's going to take, because I don't see anybody biting at the nails for him. So
this was his only college coaching experience. He coached high school, won a couple state titles, and then got hired by UAB. I just kind of a reach of a hire, but I hope the Dragons can get it figured out for sure. But something that was a big topic of controversy this weekend, if you didn't see it, was the Georgia-Auburn game. A lot of ref ball taking place with maybe the SEC protecting its biggest brands for the playoff. You never know. But if you didn't see, at the end of the first half, Auburn was at the 1 yard line, tried to punch it in right at the by going over the pile, and it was punched out, recovered by Georgia. It was really hard to tell. My initial gut told me that I thought that the ball broke the plane before it was jarred loose, and it should have been a touchdown for Auburn. Ultimately, they did rule it a fumble, but one of the confusing things for me was like, the refs ruled it a fumble on the play, but blew it dead when the guy was clearly never down who recovered it. So just like a really interesting position to be in, where it goes from 17-0 for Auburn to Georgia marches down, and I think that made it 10-3 after they kicked a field goal. So just kind of flipped the script of the game.
And it was at the end of the half too. So I mean, you have the possibility of going into halftime up 17-0. I mean, that's pretty big in a game like that, where not a lot of people had Auburn even kind of in that game. So I think it's a major slip up on the officiating part. One thing that I noticed, I saw it on Twitter today. Somebody was re-watching it on, I believe it was the SEC network was replaying it. They replay some of the big games from the weekend, and when it got to that point, right before they got to the play where they ran that sneak that ended up being called the fumble, it went to commercial. And when the commercial came back, Georgia already had the ball down the field. So they completely cut out that whole sequence and didn't even show it.
Interesting.
So it just goes to show that more than likely, are they trying to hide it? Or are they trying to be like, oh,
clearly they don't want to talk about it.
We probably did mess up. And I mean, especially, being on, of course, SEC Network, that just plays further into the conspiracy of, are you protecting your big brands here? Because it was the hot point of the game that you could say flipped it a little bit, and you're going to completely leave it out in any form of replay when that's what most people are going to probably replay. It's an important
play regardless. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a turnover in the red zone on the goal line towards the end of the half. Like, that's a huge play you want to show regardless. But maybe because of the controversy behind it, they're just like, maybe leave this one out. We don't know, because it seems like lately in some of these games, and I've seen it on the professional level too in the NFL, where there's not a lot of replays on calls that are controversial or that shows that the officiating crew messed up. And I think that's them trying to protect their crews and trying to make sure that they're not, bashed for making these wrong decisions when they should be. They should be held accountable in all forms. But, even the other thing in this game with, Kirby Smart, quote unquote, calling a timeout or not calling a timeout, whatever you want to call it, which he straight up lied about in his press conference too. And it's just absurd how all this happened.
When it comes to the turnover, the replay, I find it hard to essentially blame the crew for that one when it does go to wherever the SEC headquarters is for official review. Essentially, it gets taken out of the on-field refs. But something like you said that they really screwed up was this whole timeout fiasco with Kirby Smart. That was determined by the on-field refs, and I thought this was bad enough to be something that this crew should not be able to ref again for some time. If you missed it, Georgia has a third and one, short, or third and one, third and two, short field. They are play clock's running out. You see Kirby Smart running up the sidelines. He's screaming timeout, 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 and you can clearly see it in the replay. Reading his lips, screaming timeout, and it's a clear, classic timeout. Yeah, not a clap, but then you can see him talking to the refs, and I think there's a lot of confusion on if he was trying to say he was clapping. I think he was trying to say that the Auburn defensive players were clapping and trying to initiate a snap count, which that should be a penalty if that was occurring.
Yeah.
On my rewatch of it, I did not see an Auburn player doing that. But regardless, it is not Kirby Smart's job to dictate what the refs do. The refs didn't see it, and then instead of proceeding to take the timeout from Georgia, listen to Kirby Smart, and they don't take a timeout. They reset the play clock, and Georgia just essentially gets to calls a new play for completely free, which is so asinine. Georgia got so lucky. That to me is blatant malpractice on the referees.
It's horrible from the officiating side. I mean, I don't care what it is. If you have to sit there and gather with your other officials and to determine something, that's fine. But when the coach is in your face, saying I was clapping, or pointing, saying they were clapping and whatnot, like, sure, like, that's fine. But then to backtrack on it and be like, oh, well, he didn't call a timeout, or he's saying he didn't call a timeout, and then be like, all right, cool, he didn't call a timeout, but if he didn't call the timeout, it would have been a delay of game. Mm-hmm. But let's just not give the delay of game. Let's just reset the play clock and basically redo the down. And it's just like, what are we doing here? Like, it's absurd. And
it's crazy.
Just to piggyback off of what you were saying, where on the turnover on the goal line where it's taken out of the field officials' hands, this is where you would love to see what the ACC has implemented, where you get a live feed into the officiating headquarters where they're making the decision. And it's a big consensus that the SEC will never do that. They will never, ever show that off because they know it'll hurt their brand more than anything. I think it's a brilliant idea from the ACC to do that and showcase what goes through and what is actually happening behind the scenes so we understand what they're seeing, what the call they're making, and what they're telling the officials.
I love it.
And I believe the Big 12, I want to say, is also doing that now.
I believe they have a similar system in place.
Yeah, they have something like that where they're also showing kind of like when it goes to the headquarters and it's outside of the on-field ref's call, you kind of get a little insight. And I think that's great. I love that for the game, where you kind of get a better understanding of what's going on. And that's just something I don't think we'll ever see in the SEC unless it's a forced rule change. And even then, the SEC and probably the Big Ten will have some major pushback on that, being, why do we need to do that?
I
and
agree.
Like, well, it's probably because you guys have a lot to hide. So maybe that's something that we can see changed and, could help these officials because, like you said, it's going to probably be blamed on the on-field officials when it is taken out of their hands at that point. And, but the timeout fiasco is 100% on them, and they should 100% get, some form of disciplinary action, whether it's, suspended for a game or two or something else. Like, that cannot happen.
It's ridiculous. But ultimately, Auburn just didn't do enough to win the football game in the second half. They didn't score in the second half. As much as these things hurt them, they hurt themselves even more. The momentum obviously switched with that fumble at the goal line, but that's one that I really do see as either way. I thought it was a touchdown, but it's so hard to tell. They got to come out and perform, though. You can't get shut out in the second half and expect to win against a team like Auburn. And speaking of teams that are really struggling to win, we still have 9 Power 4 teams looking for their first Power 4 win. Boston College, UNC, Penn State, Purdue, Rutgers, Wisconsin, Arkansas, Kentucky, and Oklahoma State, who I want to shout out the shirtless guys in Section 231. That was electric to see
Fantastic.
All those guys, going tarps off, waving their shirts. It became almost 3 full sections by the end of the game, even though Oklahoma State was not playing well.
I saw how it started.
Just
I
one
saw
guy.
it was one guy, but I saw a video on TikTok of the guy who started it and why he started it, and it was, I believe, his sister or someone in his family. They were all sitting together, and it was a $10 bet.
And
Literally,
I didn't know
and
this.
it was a $10 bet for him to go over there and I guess go up into that empty section, take his tarp off, and just start waving it. And sure enough, hundreds of people go and join him. And it's funny, but by the time it got the video that I had seen, by the time it got to like its largest, he had already left, and he was kind of just admiring what he had started. It was so great.
That is awesome. A lot of these teams, though, I mean, Oklahoma State, Penn State, Arkansas have already fired their head coaches. I think these are the group of teams we'll be looking at for a little bit more coach news here. But there are 10 teams who have won quite a bit already this year. There's 10 bowl-eligible teams now. Ole Miss and A&M from the SEC, Ohio State and Indiana from the Big Ten, Texas Tech, BYU from the Big 12, Georgia Tech from the ACC, Navy joins Memphis for the AAC, and then UNLV for the Mountain West. So congrats to these 10 teams on bowl eligibility. Might not be what it was 20, 25 years ago, but it's still an accomplishment to win 6 games and you're only 7 weeks in, 8 weeks in. So congrats to them.
Always want to start your season as best as you can, and getting that sort of, that milestone of the 6 wins really sets precedence. You're like, all right, like we're only 7 weeks in and we've already gotten that milestone. Let's see how much further we can take it, especially with a lot of these teams with playoff aspirations here. So it's pretty big for most of these teams here, and I'm sure we'll have plenty more joining next week as well. So, but to jump right into some of these marquee games that happened this week, our upset of the week, of course, is the big one. Texas just dominates number 8, our rankings, Oklahoma in the Red River rivalry, 23-6. They finally get their first P4 win, and a much-needed season kind of tone setter for the rest of the season for them.
This is a huge one for them. Obviously, that gets them to 4-2, and we'll talk about this later. But they're ranked in the AP poll again. We'll share our thoughts on that a little bit later. But Texas, this is a win that they really needed, especially for young Arch Manning, who just getting a lot of crazy negativity thrown his way. But great win for Texas, and you got to wonder if John Mateer for Oklahoma came back a little bit too early in this one after that hand injury. He did not look right, and you makes you wonder if, he might have tried to rush the gun. And I can't blame him, though. It's a huge rivalry game. Don't know if he'll be playing it again in his shoes, so tough choice, but it whether he was in there or not, Oklahoma did not play well enough to win.
It's on both sides of the ball there. I mean, obviously with Mateer coming back, it could have thrown off a little bit of the rhythm they had going with their backup. But nonetheless, they just couldn't get it done on both sides. The defense just did not look good. They just couldn't seem to, put a cap on that Texas offense that has looked really lackluster. So I don't know if that's saying a lot about Oklahoma's defense more or less than it is about Texas' offense. But we'll see how both their seasons pan out after this, when we get into the deep thick of things for the SEC play.
Definitely going to be a big one for Oklahoma with that big SEC loss against a rival. But doors wide open now for Texas. They're hanging on by the skin of their teeth. But for the game of the week, we could not settle on just one. So we have 3 that we thought all were deserving. The first being 12 BYU winning in a double overtime thriller versus Arizona, 33-27. An incredible game late at night, late kickoff. That was any game that goes into overtime is great. College football overtime pre the 2-point conversion shenanigans was the best. The first 2 overtime periods are still electric. But then 18 UNLV survived Air Force 51-48. I mean, just an absolute shootout, just short of 100 points. And Air Force misses a field goal as time expires to tie it after UNLV drives down and scores to take the lead with a minute left. So that was just an instant classic. And UNLV just you know, again, finding a way to win and stay undefeated. That has been their motto this season.
They keep squeaking by, and if that's what it takes for them to win, then that's what it's taking. But I don't know how they're doing it, but they're finding a way to do it. But another team that also found a way to do it is 24 Navy, stunning Temple 32-31. That game was also absurd, just coming down to the last second with Navy converting on a 2-point conversion at the end of the game there, and just like it's just all hectic. I mean, it's like one of the best parts about college football. I mean, there was probably no rhyme or reason for them to do that, but they said, we're doing it.
Yeah.
We're going for the win, and I respect it. I love it when teams do that, so I got to give them their flowers there. But another squeaking it out for them, a conference win to keep them undefeated and ahead of the pack in the American. But some of our other top games here, of course, what we thought would have been a game of the week contender, but turned out to be a absolute slaughterfest. 17 USF absolutely destroys 19 North Texas in a game that did start off pretty good, and then USF just absolutely ran away with it. Of course, the final score being 63-36. Not a great win for North Texas. Tough pill to swallow there.
It was not. It did not turn into the game we expected. I tried to warn you, though, that USF was just going to outclass them here. You know, me being Mr. 7-0 last week. If you want to see the games that I picked and how much better I am at it than Tony, make sure you check out last week's episode. Another game I got right over you was Indiana finally proving itself versus Oregon, 30-28. You know, you could say this was game of the week, too. You know, it was the most anticipated game. Indiana looks to be controlling it in the second half. Then Mendoza throws a pick six, and Oregon all of a sudden it's 20-20, and it's just, you know, it's looking like Oregon's going to be able to squeak this one in. Indiana locks in, throws a touchdown pass to Elijah Surratt, go Dukes. They end up kicking another field goal and just made sure to shut the door on Oregon in a game that, you know, really showed that this Indiana program is not just a flash in the pan, but Cignetti is building a team that will last.
It's looking really great for Indiana fans in that program right now. You know, they finally get that monkey off their back with getting that road win against the top team. So good for them. I'm happy for it. I love it. You know, that game I really wanted to pick Indiana, but the way things were flowing, I had to go Oregon, and you know, I was wrong. Whatever. I'm okay with being wrong in that game. And you know, as much as I love Oregon, I'm okay with I love a quote unquote underdog, even though Indiana's not looking like any underdogs right now. They look like they are there to rule. So we'll have to see what, you know, they control their destiny for the most part. But another game to talk about here is, of course, number 10 Alabama holding on against number 11 Missouri. And a pretty good game, 27-24, and I thought that Alabama, you know, kind of went in there, controlled most of it, and did what they needed to do, while USC takes down number 22 Michigan 31-13 in a game that I thought was going to be a lot closer than that. And USC just put their foot down, didn't look back, and kept going. And then, of course, number 7 Texas Tech handling once again Kansas 42-17 as they just seem to dominate every opponent they run into.
Yeah, those were some good games. Missouri almost did enough to come back at the end there and tie it. They had a chance, blew it there at the end. And then USC, I thought that they would beat Michigan. I did not quite expect the score to be like this, but I did think they'd get things done. And then, like you said, Texas Tech just continues to handle people. They've won every game by 20-plus points. So continue to impress. But taking a look at our games, Tony, I know we covered Tulane's Thursday night clash in our preview episode for the week, but didn't know if you wanted to give a couple mentions, just another little shout out to your Green Wave here.
Yeah, you know, of course we got the job done in a very weird fashion against ECU on our Thursday night game, kind of squeaking it out there, but you know, the offense kind of showed up there at the end of the game. Defense definitely looked a lot better, especially in the first half. it was kind of a flip sort of thing where our defense was great in the first half, offense was bad, and then kind of in the second half it was almost the opposite. But our defense did come up with a couple of good stops there in the fourth quarter, because the third quarter we got our ass kicked pretty much. It was very bad. But nonetheless, they got it done. They move on, still undefeated in the conference. So with a big game coming up this weekend.
Definitely looking forward to seeing how Tulane responds. Still, the Americans wide open. But looking at my JMU Dukes, we took down Louisiana 24-14 in another ugly offensive performance. You know, it's another one of those games, and I've said it before, where it just feels like JMU kind of dominates the game, but the score does not reflect it, and the opponent is constantly in the game. JMU's defense is just incredible. We are now the only team left at the FBS level to not give up 300 yards in a game. So they have kept us in every game this season. It was 14-7 at half, Louisiana. Defense shuts them out, but the offense is just so streaky. At one point, we had 8 drives into Louisiana territory for only 7 points. We had 4 turnovers, if you count a turnover on down. So the offense needs to clean things up drastically, because the defense is not going to be able to bail them out every time. They've played incredible this year so far, but our offensive performances, we had 477 yards to their 280 yards, and we're only winning by 10 points. We should be winning this game by more with what we've been able to do. We stall once we get into the opponent team's territory. We got a big one coming up next week against ODU. They did stumble against Marshall, but this is, of course, the Royal Rivalry, so homecoming for JMU. I am going to be on the ground for that one come Saturday, so I'm looking forward to it. JMU's defense is as legit as they come, but our offense is still in that streaky position.
It'll be a fun one to watch, this upcoming game with them finally getting a chance at ODU, who, like you said, had stumbled this past weekend, but I still think that they're still a pretty good team, so it still should be a good team, and definitely one that JMU has to win, in my opinion, to stay in that playoff race.
JMU has to win out. We're 3-0 in the Sun Belt. We're going to have to go 11-1 in the regular season, which includes a tough game at home at the end of the year against Washington State. But we're going to have to go 11-1, then 12-1, win the conference, and need the American to cannibalize itself. But JMU has the talent to go 12-1. I truly do believe that. Do they have the discipline, though, is going to be the bigger question.
I could say the same about my Green Wave. We're one of the most penalized teams in the country, so if they can, the thing that I have a hope about with them is that they, this many weeks in, this many games in, I have yet to see them play their best game. And the fact that they've won this many games and they're still doing it, even with the sometimes terrible football that they're playing, they're finding a way to get it done. So
that's exactly
getting
how
hot,
I feel.
Yeah, if you can get hot at the right time and just ride it to the end of the season, you got all things going your way. All it takes is one other game to slip up, and next thing you know, you're in the playoff. So it's all it takes. With these G5 teams, is all it takes is one slip up from a P4, and you're right in the mix. So we'll have to see how it pans out for both of our teams here, because it's going to be very interesting coming down the stretch.
It's going to be a great playoff race, so definitely something to keep our eye out for.
For sure. We're just going to jump right into the thing that is the most important here, and that is our rankings, which, have always stirred controversy, whether it's ours, the APs, our individuals, the dummies, whatever it is. There's always going to be controversy between them because people have different opinions on everything. But nonetheless, these are our rankings, our rules, and our rules, yet again, like we're always going to mention, with our criteria, head-to-head is a key factor. Of course, weekly results will always come into effect. Excuse me. The overall vibes of some teams, how they're playing and whatnot. And that's how especially this past week, I've, with some of my movements, I've really gone on some of the vibes and some teams and how they're playing recently and whatnot. So And then, of course, we do AP style voting, where we have 5 collective people put in the ballot, and we see where it's going. So, without further ado, our rankings here. Go ahead and kick us off here.
Thank you. Number one team still is Miami here. I really did consider putting Indiana, jumping them all the way up to 1. It was an impressive win, but ultimately I'm going to give the nod to Miami. But Indiana is my new number 2 here. And then I have A&M moving up into the top 5 as well. So top 5, Miami, Indiana, Ohio State, Texas Tech, and Texas A&M. So all 4 major conferences represented, 2 of those being Big Ten teams. And then I did drop Oregon from 2 to 6. I didn't think they lost by 10, but I didn't want to drop them too hard. I still think they're one of the better teams, so keeping them in. Maybe it's controversial with how I've dropped a lot of other teams, which one being OU, who I had in my top 10, and now you can see I no longer have them ranked. So just a little. Oh, actually, I do see on these rankings, I do have Oklahoma ranked still. I think we needed to update them a little bit. I think I, at the last minute, did take Oklahoma out, actually, and I put LSU in at 25, which took me a lot of thought, and I don't think I got it in time for Tony, but that is on me for not doing my job. But regardless, I just thought Oregon did enough to keep the ranking, where Oklahoma, they lost to Texas. I dropped them, and I'm not ranking Texas because they have 2 losses. But one that stirred a lot of controversy is me having Nebraska all the way up at 15. I think Nebraska's a good team. They're really riding the waves of beating Cincinnati, who beat Iowa State, which is, souring a little bit now that Iowa State's fallen out of the rankings with back-to-back losses. So a lot of interesting stuff here. I do have Utah and USC jumping up into mine along with Washington. And like I said, I did have LSU, even if it wasn't reflected here. I just, felt like LSU has done enough to earn my ranking. But, I really wanted to touch on Indiana again. I think they really do deserve respect. And I think it shows that teams should not be judged solely on the recruits that they have, like the SEC does in the preseason. Indiana has played really good football the last 2 years, has 2 losses. They have 0 5-stars, 7 4-stars, and the 72nd best roster in the sport according to 247 Talent Composite. Yet they're sitting here at, in the top 3, top 2 for most people. It really shows that good teams are not just built on random decisions on recruits. It's on culture, coaching, and development too. Teams aren't just dependent on if you have these recruits that are highly talented, because just because a recruit is highly talented doesn't mean they're going to become a good player. You got to make sure that you help them get there. I think Indiana is the epitome of, I don't care that all these recruits are going to the SEC. The rankings are biased within it, and Indiana's clearly proven that they can win with who they're recruiting.
Absolutely, I agree 100%. And just so I will fix your Oklahoma ranking in post. I made these graphics after you had to put your initial one in, and I forgot that you had changed it. So
no, that's on me.
It's fine. Whatever, we'll fix it in post. I promise. It'll look different for you guys when you actually see it. But yeah. But I'm with you there on Indiana. I had them move up to 2 as well. I think just about all of us did, I want to say. Except for one. I know Cody had put them at 1. Which, again, I was, I considered a little bit as well. But I just think Miami is still that, one team until it's rightfully taken from them. But Indiana's damn close. And again, of course, Ohio State staying at 3. I had Texas A&M and Texas Tech jump up 2 spots into the top 5. Ole Miss dropped down for me 1 spot because they kind of barely eked one out this past weekend. So I thought, with the way Texas Tech has been playing, and I know you were harping on me a little bit that they should be on the top 5 because they've won every game 20+. And I agree, they are a dog of a team, and I would not want to play them right now. So I definitely jumped them into the top 5 with so much potential to move up there from them. And then I also had Oregon move down. I put them down 5 slots at 7. I'm not going to punish them too bad for losing to Indiana, albeit, was at home. It's kind of a game you expect to win there in that environment. But it just couldn't seem to get it done. I did have Alabama move up into my top 10 as much as I hate it. But I got to do what it is. I try not to be uber biased in these, but, they've had a great, comeback of the season so far. So I got to give them their flowers right now. Everybody else kind of just moving up a couple slots because of the people that have dropped. I still have Oklahoma ranked at 18. I know it was brought up a little bit between the Blitz and I that he was kind of questioning why I had only dropped Oklahoma to 18, while in last week's rankings I had dropped LSU out completely for losing to Ole Miss. And I had to admit, I kind of forgot about LSU, but at the same time, I was kind of okay with it because they were one of those teams that I thought didn't have a great resume realistically. Like, yeah, they only have 1 loss right now, and it's to Ole Miss, who's a very good team, but they don't have any of those marquee wins really, with their best win being, South Carolina, Florida, maybe Clemson week 1. Sure, yeah, Clemson sucks now, so it doesn't really say much. But they don't really have that great win, albeit they do have their chance this weekend with going against Vanderbilt. So that'll be a good one to watch there. But, kept Vandy in the same spot. Obviously, they had the bye. And, of course, Mizzou, for me, dropped 5 spots. I didn't punish them too much as well. They were 11 for me playing the number 10 team, so the winner was always going to go up a slot or 2, and then the loser was always going to drop with the teams behind them winning. Navy and UNLV kind of just swapped. Those 2 teams are kind of in limbo right now for me. I'm not really too sure what to do with them. I want to keep them ranked, and I'm going to keep them ranked unless, if one of them drops a game, they're probably going to drop out. With the fashion that they have won games, especially UNLV, where they always seem to dig themselves a hole and then slowly make their way out of it. So those are 2 teams for sure that are hanging on by a thread in my rankings.
I'm the same way with both of them.
Yeah, I think most of us are, except for Will. And we'll talk about that. But those 2 are definitely hanging on by a thread for me, even though they're both undefeated. I haven't seen that, prowess of them for being undefeated teams, unlike a team like a Memphis, where it's like, okay, yeah, they're like a legit undefeated team. They go out and they handle their business. So just those 2 are definitely, barely hanging on there. And then, of course, like I said, I had LSU jump back in with USC Utah, and I decided to throw my Green Wave back in there at 25. I think this is a little biased of me, of course, but I still think that their resume is pretty good in comparison to some others. I was back and forth between them, Washington, and Nebraska, but if I threw in Nebraska, I would have had to have put them over Cincinnati, and I have Cincinnati at 17, and I just don't think Nebraska is a top 16, maybe 15 team, in my opinion.
Yeah, I've gotten a lot of hate for that one.
I think they're right there. Nebraska is close to being ranked, but I don't know if I can rank them that high. I just don't think they deserve it, in my opinion, unless they.
I think they're a little bloated on my end right now, but that's where I'm going to keep them for the time being compared to.
No,
what else
and I
is
get
going
it.
on.
No, I get it, because that's our criteria, and we stick by it as best as we can. Because we don't want to be inconsistent like the AP and whatnot, with their dumb rankings.
Yeah.
But I understand where you're coming from on your side, but for me, I can't put them that high yet unless they really go out and wow me. Washington is very, very close as well. But I was like, you know what? I'm going to show a little bias here. I don't care. I'm going to put them in there. And I will say that they did get votes in the AP, so those people do know ball.
I felt an urge to rank JMU, but I can't sit here and lie and think that they deserve it. The offense is still limiting it for me. But I will say Tulane is in my next five out. It's Tennessee, Oklahoma, Tulane, Houston, and JMU. So all of those teams I think could be ranked. That kind of rounds out what would be my top 30. And then I did have Michigan, Iowa State, and North Texas all falling this week as well. Just some small shifts that I think that they're going to have a bigger impact on the rankings later in the year, especially that North Texas USF game.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I had North Texas, of course, drop out, Michigan, Iowa State, and ODU. They got their 1 week to shine in the rankings for me, and now they're gone. I don't think they'll probably make an appearance again. But my next five out is, of course, Nebraska. Like I had just said, they're damn close. Houston is still in the mix. Louisville is still in the mix for me. Like Washington, of course. And I did put in there JMU as one of my next five out. They're teetering on the 5-6 mark. I did contemplate Illinois. I think they deserve a little bit of recognition as well, but especially in comparison to some of these SEC teams that get ranked. But
well, I will say with Illinois, they have the 2 losses right now, so I cannot.
I know. I'm just comparing it to more or less not ours, but the AP nonetheless.
I will say
with the 2 losses. 2 lost teams that are in there for the AP compared to Illinois.
I agree. I
go resume for resume. Illinois has the better resume.
I think here soon in the Dummies poll, we're going to see some 2 lost teams starting to earn some rankings. And I think the 3 most notable are Notre Dame, Texas, and Illinois. And I do want to throw Duke in there as a 2 lost team who has a real shot in the ACC still. Big game this weekend against Georgia Tech. So I think here soon we're going to have some 2 lost teams finally enter our rankings. UNLV and Navy, I think, like you said, are hamstringing us personally. I'm a big believer. They're 6-0 at this point. They should be ranked, but they're holding on. They are holding on right now. And, many would argue that just because they're 6-0 doesn't mean they're, a top team and that's record bias. And to those people, I say, screw you. They're 6-0. That's worthy of a ranking. It's about what is deserved, not about what's hypothetical on paper.
Exactly. I'm with you there. And, just to quickly note what you said about Duke as well with their big game against Georgia Tech. They are the favorites, last I saw.
They are 1.5.
They were. When I had seen it, they were 2.5. But I'm sure it's changed every minute of the day so far. I'm sure
Be a huge boost for your green wave if Duke.
Absolutely. I mean, if the more Duke wins, the better. And that was another thing that happened this past weekend for Tulane. Is their strength of record is actually now the top 20 in the nation. So their resume is looking better and better with each week that's going by. So I think that's going to help them a lot come playoff committee time. So
they will definitely get a boost from that. Apparently the committee will be looking at that a little bit more tightly. But Tony, I think without further ado, let us jump into the AP and Dynasty Dummies ranking comparison. So as you can see here, for the AP, Indiana is jumping into that 3rd slot, while Ohio State and Miami are holding on firm at 1 and 2. A&M jumps up to 4. We do have Oregon sliding down to 8 and Alabama jumping up to 6, which I think has been a big point of controversy online, where people think Oregon should be ahead of Bama, given that their losses to Indiana, number 3 team now, according to them, and Bama is to 3-3 FSU. But you could argue that Bama has some better wins. Personally, I think this is, shooter's choice. It could really be either one of those teams there.
Oh, I'm with you there. It could be either or, but in my opinion, of course, like we had just shown, I think Oregon would still be above them if it was, kind of showing resumes there. I mean, they're always going to argue. It's the whole thing with the SEC. They're always going to argue that their schedule is harder because they play more ranked opponents, even though it's up to a bunch of random people who those ranked opponents are.
The SEC teams are overrated. Overrated teams play overrated teams. Teams say, look at how great our schedule is because they've played now overrated teams. That's exactly the cycle of the SEC.
Yeah, they're going to say that, a 3-loss team is better than they're going to say a 3-loss SEC team is better than a 1-loss, Big 10, Big 12 team. And just because of their schedule. And I'm like, no, that's not how it works in my opinion. Albeit I will take into some consideration of who you're playing if it's, top of the top and whatnot. But it's some of these teams that get ranked and they just, they disappear like out of nowhere. I mean, they're gonna make Texas look good as best they can. Like we see them getting thrown in at 21. Like we had said last week, where they had multiple votes and they were just on the fringe of being voted back in. And sure enough, they get the win against Oklahoma, and that immediately propels them back into the top 25. Which again, absurd in my opinion. But then you also have 2-loss Notre Dame sitting at 13. Which
it's crazy to me.
Blows my mind that they can have them all the way up at 13 when realistically
that's all but guaranteeing if they win out they make the playoff is what this is saying, because they're only going to continue to climb. And I do think Notre Dame is a top team, and I'm sure I will have them ranked sooner rather than later, but to at this point in the season have them ranked 13th I think is a bit heinous.
It's a little absurd nonetheless. I mean, I agree with you. I think they are a good team, and I think at some point they end up back in our rankings. But now's not the time. I mean, it's still, we're not even halfway through. We're getting to that halfway point, and, they have to win out to have any sort of chance. And from what it's looking like is they're going to, they have a good chance of winning out. And like you said, it's almost going to guarantee them their playoff spot. But we'll find out in a couple weeks here when these playoff rankings do, in fact, come out. That'll start to really change, conversations and whatnot, because those are the ones that matter the most.
Exactly. It's interesting to see how things shape out. Another thing with the AP poll, they had USC, Texas, Utah, Cincinnati, and Nebraska joining, and a lot of people were saying, well, how the heck is Nebraska one slot below Cincinnati when they beat them head to head, which is my whole argument of having Nebraska ranked right now, of especially one slot ahead of Cincinnati. I think these teams are really even. That game was super close. But, how could Nebraska be a slot behind Cincinnati in the AP? Like, what are AP voters doing? And I will come to their defense a little bit here because of the aggregate formula the AP and our rankings uses here, that it might be a little crazy that Cincinnati is ranked at 24 and Nebraska at 25. However, if you look at the individual ballots, 27 voters had Nebraska ranked ahead of Cincinnati, while only 8 had Cincinnati ahead of Nebraska. So those 8, not sure what you're doing, but only 2 of those had Cincinnati 1 spot ahead of Nebraska. However, only 17 people ranked just Cincinnati, while 5 ranked just Nebraska. So Cincinnati just got a lot more votes in general. So in the aggregate, they ended up squeaking out past Nebraska by just a few points.
It's live by the collective, die by the collective sort of thing, where the collective AP poll of course at almost all times is ridiculous, but when you actually dive into the individual rankings and see how some of them are, you kind of get a better lay of it. It still doesn't really explain a lot of decisions that some of these people make. I know every week there's at least a handful of individual polls that people call out, and they're like, what are we thinking here? Did you even watch any football and whatnot? I know I saw a video of it today. Barstool Tate, he obviously big college football fan, obviously Ohio State fan. he has made it a goal of his for every single week when the AP poll comes out to call out the worst ballot, and just decide, or not decide, but like go over the decisions that they made, and they're just kind of like, he's like, what are we doing here? Like, and I hate Ohio State, but his insight on it is fine.
I
Like,
agree.
it's right
I
almost.
agree.
Like, I like the fact that someone of his, stature, I guess, in the college football world is using it to be like, what are we doing here? Like, why are we doing this? The AP is supposed to be something that's like almost prestigious, and it's gotten to the point where it's just garbage now, and like nobody wants to take it seriously, and it's hard to take it seriously with some of these ballots. But I will give a shout out to whoever's ballot it was that San Diego State is receiving votes. So I will shout out those voters. They possibly no ball, but I know that the two reporters that do for a fact no ball are the ones that gave Tulane votes.
Well, I don't think any voter knows what they're doing yet, including me, because JMU isn't number one in the country, but we'll get there one day. Looking at our rankings, though, Indiana jumped up to 2, and you did mention it. Miami went 4 out of 5 on first place votes, with Cody giving Indiana a first place nod. I can respect that, and then we finally have Texas Tech as a on aggregate here, making the top 5. I have been their advocate all season. I have been pushing their propaganda, so happy to see that happen. And then we got Alabama and BYU jumping into the top 10, and then USF and Memphis sitting at 13 and 14. USF jumps Memphis despite the loss. I think that big win against North Texas really propelled them. And then UNLV sitting at 16 solely because we have a voter who does not know ball. Will Martin, I'm calling you out. You have UNLV as number 10 in the country. That is why UNLV is number 16 in our ballots. Everyone else has them 20 to 25 at the highest. I don't even think they're receiving unanimous votes, but Will thinks that they're a top 10 team. He's had them ranked all year, so I will give him credit that they have just continued to move up the rankings, but to think that they're a top 10 team is him just being him. I don't, there's no explanation for it. It's a war crime.
Yeah, it's, when we were waiting for him to put in his rankings, and I'm sitting here watching our spreadsheet and see UNLV go to number 10, my jaw dropped. I mean, it was like, what are we doing here, man? Like, it's so funny.
He had him at 12 the week before. Like, he has steadily moved them up.
Yeah, and that's been his explanation, is that, when we first got the collective rankings, which wasn't until week 1, after week 1, so heading into week 2, we got the collective rankings. They were 2-0 because they had played week 0, and he had them ranked 25. Cool, that's fine and whatnot. But then every week since, he's had them jump up. I mean, all up to week 4, he already had them at 16. And then obviously we're here at week 7, and he's got them at 10.
Yeah,
and they've just slowly made their way up. And for him, I guess eking out these wins is enough to get them into the top 10. And man, I don't know if he just loves a good comeback story or what, but he just always puts them up there.
It is crazy. They've gone from 25, 21, 17 to 16 to 15, 12, 10 now. I respect the agenda that he's pushing, but I think it's the wrong team to be pushing an agenda for. If they were beating most teams by 10, 15 plus, you know what? It is what it is. We have Memphis and USF up there pretty high, but UNLV, to say that they're that high, I think is crazy. I dropped them because they nearly lost. They're squeaking out wins. They deserve to be ranked, but I am gonna call you out on this one. Will, this is a bit crazy.
It was a little absurd nonetheless, but that's the whole point of this. We all have our own opinions on stuff, whether they're right or wrong. his are mostly wrong. But it is what it is with him. He's the wild card for sure in our rankings. But I love a little entertainment in them. It just makes it more fun. Obviously, in our poll, we had North Texas, Michigan, and Louisville drop out, while Utah, USC, and Washington jumped in. And the other teams receiving votes on our end was Louisville and Nebraska, tying with 11 votes. And then the only other team that received votes was Tulane, from me, receiving one other vote. So it just goes to show how tight we are as a group here in our collective rankings. Well, while my co-host figures out his terrible internet, let us know what you guys think. What you think about our rankings, what we got right, what we got wrong, what the AP got right, what the AP got wrong, which is quite a lot. But don't forget to follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Dynasty Dumbies. Feel free to follow our personal accounts at Hunter_Shaw5 and at CronyTony20. And we will see you later this week for the preview show. See ya.